So we begin Church of Magdalene in just under a week now. There's a handful of spaces left, so I'm wanting to cap it to about 30 just to maintain an intimacy in the space. But something I wanted to share is one of the ways we are hooked into this patriarchal matrix is through the over-identification with the mind, with intellect and knowing. And that leaves us very cut off from our own soul, because there is a truth that is beyond external information and intellect, a truth that cannot be accumulated as such. It can only be felt and received through the body. And this is really the power of the feminine, and what humanity has been so separated from. So these mass media systems are taking advantage of the fact that women and men are disconnected from their own instincts and inner knowing, which means that we are far more likely to be manipulated and to rely on their sources of information in order to have certainty, in order to feel safe. Now, certainty is kind of an illusion. The idea that we can be completely certain that we know how something's going to go, and therefore we can have total control over the unfolding of it. That's a myth. The only thing that we can truly embody is trust and is faith, and the courage to surrender to the mystery of life and follow our instincts along the way. But because of this over-identification with masculine values, such as thought, information, intellect, we have become very cut off from our instincts and our inner knowing and our intuition. And where that's led us is we don't trust the feminine. We don't trust that pulse of truth within our body, that instinctual fire, because we've been taught that truth is information and it's intellect, and the more you can accumulate, the more you can know. The more you can analyze and speculate, the more certain you'll be. But the feminine really brings us to a truth and a knowing that is so much deeper than the mind. It's a knowing that cannot be seen with the naked eye. It cannot be defined through logic and reason. It is far deeper than that. It's a visceral, embodied sense. And when we reclaim this, collectively and individually, we have a much more wider capacity to be sovereign and be anchored into our soul and our unique essence. And we can trust that life is taking us to what is for us. Life is pulling us towards where our alignment is. to the places and the people that are in service to us. But when we are over-identified with the mind and the mental knowing, everything gets rationalized through the ego. And the ego operates through what it knows and what's safe and what it can control. So if we're only living through the mind, we become very cut off from the more expansive, powerful potential of ourselves. Because it's just about, well, how do I get from A to B? How do I survive? How do I make ends meet? How can I be sure that I can get this? So it's a very, very narrow way of boxing ourselves. Whereas when we can tune in and trust the pulse of creation that lives within the body, that is the feminine, we allow ourselves to be guided by our own soul, our own sovereignty, that is always wanting to move in the direction of liberation, magic, aliveness. And when we become intimate with the feminine, we realize that there is a greater power in not knowing. Because when we admit to not knowing, we allow ourselves to surrender to the mystery of life and of love. As in, we allow ourselves to be held, supported and guided by a power that is so much greater than our own ego and our own mind. And I really believe that for women in particular, to have that relationship to the divine, to life, where we can allow ourselves to follow the spark of our soul in full faith that we're going to be held and taken care of along the way. That there is a greater power that we can rest into, that is beyond our own control. We are able to fall into a state of surrender and trust with life, rather than desperately trying to hold on for control, which leads to numbness, flatness, lack of inspiration, pulling ourselves into a lower timeline where we're looping karma and old patterns. To be in touch with our own instincts and inner knowing is to lead a life of richness and fullness. There are so many things that the mind just cannot know. And also that the mind doesn't need to know. Our deepest fullness is in our capacity to surrender to the mystery, to God. And just listen to the part, listen to the wisdom and the spark within our hearts, within our souls. So if you're a woman and you're wanting to get in touch with your deep inner knowing, your instincts and your soul essence, so that you can truly surrender and trust in life, in the divine, in the masculine, because our capacity to surrender and trust in life is equal to surrendering and trusting in the masculine. You can head to the link in my bio. We begin next Wednesday, and just reach out if you have any questions.